quite honestly, men and boys are not doing well. There's an assumption that they are, and that's really not correct. Now it is a full 2 female degrees for every male degree. A lot of people look at it and say, well, it's because we're succeeding with women. And actually, you look at it, it's largely in recent years because we're failing with the men.
Women can do anything men can do. The message for men is you are no longer needed.
It makes sense that marketing and media would want to do that because estimates are that around 85% of the spending in America is controlled by women. And we've gotten a shift within our media portrayal of men and boys that is extremely negative. And if they're seen as relevant, they're generally seen as kind of bumbling idiots. And we really have an idea that males are the disposable gender. Suicide is largely a male problem in the United States.
What is healthy masculinity? Dr. Fincher, welcome. Please tell us who you are and what do you currently do?
Thank you. My name is Mark Fincher, and I am a professor at Mississippi State University, and I am a researcher and scholar of higher education strategy. So that's my day job, as I describe it. My interest areas are higher education access and finance. So how we fund higher education or don't fund it, and how that influences people getting to go and succeeding and their long-term career opportunities after that. I am also the kind of founding leader of the International Men's Day efforts in the state of Mississippi, which has mostly been through Mississippi State. So we have a number of people that have been working on this, and it's really recognizing a need to support men and boys and provide encouragement and recognizing the challenges that they're facing.
What are we going to be talking about today and why everybody should care about this topic?
Yes. Well, I think it's very important for everyone to care about this because it's not just an issue for men and boys, but how men and boys are doing affects how women and girls do as well. So it's an important thing to think about. And my initial interest in this was somewhat driven by the fact that I have a 23-year-old son. And so when he was a teenager, seeing all the challenges that he was facing and how society and the world has changed from the way it was when I was a kid. So we've had some substantial changes. And quite honestly, men and boys are not doing well. There's an assumption that they are, and that's really not correct.
Yeah, when we were planning this episode, this is a topic that got me very interesting, especially because, like I mentioned, I am a mother of 2 boys, and I've seen those changes in society, and I'm scared. I'm scared of what my boys are going to be facing in the future, and even now, why men are quitting college. Where are men? What is happening?
Well, the big picture of it is that men, as a percentage of the student body, have been declining sharply ever since the 1970s. And about 1975, there was a bit of a national outcry because even though we had equal rights amongst men and women, pursuing equal opportunities and so on, 55% of the student body was male and only 45% was female. Obviously, with the comparison. And that was in the 1970s. And efforts were made to make the higher education process much more friendly and attractive to female students to try to straighten that out. Well, it worked very successfully, but in the process, we ended up making a system that was less attractive to men. So now we've gotten to the point that the undergraduate students are at least 58 to 60% female now, and then only about 40% male. And it's a bit more striking and easier to verify when you look at the number of degrees that are granted every year. Now it is a full 2 female degrees for every male degree. So right at 2/3, 66% of them are female. And this is quite a shift that we have had. And a lot of people look at it and say, well, it's because we're succeeding with women. And actually, you look at it, it's largely in recent years because we're failing with the men. So that's the situation we're in, which strangely people don't seem to see as a problem. They see that as progress rather than a difficulty. And there are a number of things that have led to this. We've got a disparity of preparation on the K-12 level. So you get fewer men that are really college ready when they come out. And this is quite different than when it would have been 30 years ago. You would expect at least as high, if not higher, preparation for the boys coming out of high school.
Coming from traditional media and marketing, the past 10 years, what I've seen everywhere as marketing strategies on TV, in radio, and especially on social media has been this message. Women can do anything men can do. Mm-hmm. But also, because I'm a mother of 2 boys, I noticed the message for men is you are no longer needed.
Yes.
And that hurts me. And I was one of those when I was younger that I was very driven and even upset. I can confess that, upset about men because I came from a home with domestic violence in Mexico. But after I became a mother, and especially mother of boys, I saw the world in a completely different way. And after meeting amazing men as my husband, I can see that they need help more than ever. How do you describe what marketing and media is doing to make this problem even bigger?
Well, it makes sense that marketing and media would want to do that because estimates are that around 85% of the spending in America is controlled by women. Okay, if they're making the purchasing decisions, then it would make sense that marketing would want to focus on that and build. So it's part of their job to do that. And we've gotten a shift within our media portrayal of men and boys that is extremely negative. We had one of our recent International Men's Day had a history professor as one of our main speakers, and he was talking about the transition of how men are portrayed, and particularly fathers are portrayed on television, in the movies, and that sort of thing. And if they're seen as relevant, they're generally seen as kind of bumbling idiots. And the reality is that the fathers that are active and involved are still doing those good things, and sometimes they're funny. Okay, sometimes they stumble along the way, which would make some good TV.
Like women do.
Exactly. Yeah. So trying hard doesn't mean it's always going to be smooth. And even being successful doesn't mean it's always going to be smooth. And it can, there's some great comedy there, but it's left out largely. And you have major series that don't even have any married men or fathers in them. They're not a prominent part of anything that's being done. So they're considered as an afterthought. And we really have an idea that the males are the disposable disposable gender. We have a history of if the ship is sinking, it's women and children first, men last. And we get a lot of that now. And I don't mind, having the men being sacrificial in the process, but a lack of recognition of that, I think, is problematic. And you mentioned saying the idea that boys are not needed, men are not needed. That's a pretty powerful fallacy, but it's a very convenient one. And I like to point out when people say, well, a woman doesn't need a man, and I say, well, that's absolutely true now. And that's because generations of men have worked really hard to create a world where a specific woman does not need a specific man in her own life. And I'd like to say to those that are watching, you are very important and of critical value, and there is a purpose. And one of the things that we notice in all this is a lot of men do not recognize how important they are or what sort of purpose they have. There's a lot of teaching that goes on that men and boys are dangerous. But historically, you look at it, men and boys are critical, but those that have no purpose or perceive no value or future become problematic at times. So that's what you actually see in history. Those that are striving towards good and bigger and better things tend to do very well and are very great contributors to society.
And let's talk about those numbers. So that's the tendency now. Men are not enrolling to colleges,
No.
and those that are getting enrolled are dropping off. Besides everything that's going on in society or how society has portrayed the value of men, what are other factors that you think are important to mention here that are making them not to want to study a degree, a college degree?
Well, one of the major things that is going on is the cost. And a large portion of the gap that we see is from boys and young men coming from low-income households. And this is showing up a lot in the drop in the community college enrollment because that's where a lot of them would have gone before. And we have an unfortunate myth that's very convenient in the United States that everyone can afford to go to college. And that's simply not correct. We have mechanisms where everyone can borrow a lot of money and actually pay to get in and pay the tuition and fees and costs. But if you have to go into great debt, that's not really being able to afford it. And that's one of our real challenges. And I'm doing research on my own that has yet to be published. It has been accepted to a peer review conference, but so you have to take it a little bit skeptically till it actually gets published in the scholarly media. But it has shown that there is a very powerful correlation between the rising cost of attending colleges and the gap between men and women. And this is largely showing up in the community colleges.
I noticed the U.S. is the country where college education is more expensive in the whole world. Me coming from Mexico, I had the privilege of going to a private school with almost full scholarship. Now that we are having these conversations at home with my son, who is 16, there is no way he can go to college. Even my husband has a decent job. I work. Both of us have incomes, and even with both incomes, it will be like a crucial sacrifice for us to pay for a college degree if we don't find scholarships. I cannot imagine, like you say, other families that are struggling even more economically. So what's the work done in that field? Is someone doing something? Is the government aware of this?
There is governmental awareness, but there's comfort with the situation. And I also teach a class on history of higher education. And what you were describing about things being more expensive here for people, what they have to pay out of pocket to be a college student, is not the way it's always been. And we've now gotten used to this. I'm so old, I grew up in the time when that wasn't the case. And the example I like to put about this is in 1980, the end of the Carter administration, the movement towards discounting the cost of college through government funding was so great at that point that if someone didn't have any money and came from a low-income household, they went to public institutions in their own state, they got the maximum federal grant, and worked a part-time job and worked in the summer and that sort of thing, then they would be expected to graduate with zero debt. Okay, zero. And that's getting no funding from their family that way. Now that person is going to be, and I haven't recalculated these numbers yet, you would expect about $45,000 in debt. So that's the difference that we had from them. So starting in the 1980s in the Reagan administration, they reduced the funding a little bit. And I'm a fan of how they did things in the Carter administration, but what was done in the Reagan administration worked. They basically were having people put a little more of their own money and not just time and effort. Because in the 70s, at the end, you were investing your time and your effort. That was the biggest expenditure the student was putting in. They weren't working full time somewhere else in a career, and they were having to work real hard. But somebody that was working real hard, they could be expected to come out of college with zero debt and step into a career that would probably, have a premium salary. So it was really a no-brainer move, particularly for the young men to do so that were worried about supporting a family one day. Now, with the debt that someone has to take on if they're from a low-income background and having to debt finance everything, in a lot of majors it's prohibitive. And one of the big questions that people wrestle with now is college worth it? So that term comes out all the time. And objectively, I look at it and say, well, of course it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. You develop the person, they become a better citizen, they have a lot more capabilities and more options. They can socially, enhance their situation very well. But then the question comes that's kind of behind that: is it worth it? Are they in a position to develop wealth? To improve their financial situation? And unfortunately, now the question's a resounding maybe. If they have to debt finance everything, and if they pick a major that doesn't quickly lead to high earnings, then probably no.
And why the financial side is affecting more the decision making in men than in women?
Yes. Well, I believe that it is strongly related to differing views of how we look at debt. The high debt system is not doing women any favors either, but they react to it differently. They are more likely to go ahead and get the education which they need, and then take on the debt with the negative connotations that it could have. Because we have a massive student debt crisis in America now. It's affecting us financially, but it's really coming from low-income women, because they're continuing to get the education that we tell them that they need, and we need them to get these levels of education as a society and an economy, and then they suffer the cost of the debt, whereas a lot of the men are instead foregoing the education to avoid the debt, and they try to make it without the education instead of having to try to overcome the debt.
I want to know how all this is affecting men emotionally, because I know you are a big advocate of that.
Yes. Well, the emotional well-being of men is a very serious issue that we have now that has not gotten a lot of attention. The reason I started getting into this was leading an event that was looking into suicide intervention. And the thing that I learned from it that was quite shocking to me is that suicide is largely a male problem in the United States. And that's the way it is around the world. It's a little more male specific in the United States than in other countries. But in most places, you would get between 2/3 to 3/4 of suicides being men. That's the norm for places that take those statistics. In the United States, it's 4 out of 5. So we're in the 80% range now. So we're a little more male specific, and the growth in male suicide really represents the growth in suicide in the United States. And when you look at and break it down, it gets especially scary how it has grown amongst young men and older boys, and men that we would see kind of in their prime in many ways, in the 50s. Those groupings, like 14 to 24-year-old men and boys, in some ways you kind of cut the data, it's the number one cause of death in the United States, number one. And that's in a world that we drive and text at the same time. Okay, so it's not car accidents, it's not drug overdoses, it's not things like, it is actual intentionally taking their own life. And amongst the men in their 50s, it's the second highest cause of death after heart failure. And the extra concerning part of this is that's not the big problem, okay? Because that is the shocking problem. It's the canary in the coal mine of a bigger issue of leading to despair. And when you look at the overall deaths of despair, it is enormously male-driven, and the numbers are great. When you add in drug overdoses, people that are drinking themselves to death, basically if you have drug and alcohol abuse and inactivity, people die young, and those are the overall deaths of despair. That's really where the big problem is. And from a higher ed standpoint, it's not just those few people that are committing suicide. It's how many just disappear rather than take their own lives. They drop out of college, they drop out of society, they're not participating. That's the biggest problem.
What are they? Why people keep saying men are more lonely than ever?
Yes.
Where are all those men? Like, even it's affected on the dating environment with women. Like,
yes,
what's happening to men?
Well, that's an enormous issue into itself, because they are largely checking out of the dating environment, and since they were kids, they have been told, don't touch, don't offend, don't be involved with girls and women, and surprise, surprise, a lot of them have listened. And that's what they have taken, really internalized this and said, you're bad, you're the threat.
They are afraid of women these days?
Very much, yeah. And that's a very common, that they're afraid of being seen as an offensive person to women, as being someone that is harmful to women and girls. And the only way to really prevent that is to withdraw. There is no acceptable behavior that they can do and say, well, I did it right, so it wasn't my fault. So the only way is to withdraw from it, and that's the activity that they're doing, and it's quite concerning. But the results are not too surprising when you think about it. If you tell them to not do this, and they work to not do it, then they're not working to do the positive things that we would like for them to do, and society would be better off if they did.
What's the role technology is playing in all these too? I've seen boys more involved into insulating themselves with technology.
Yes.
And I see that reflected on the dating world, but also in the academic world. Like they and I'm going to say something that sounds very strong, but they look like zombies. They dedicate themselves to technology because I feel like that's the only safe space they can find.
That is certainly their perception. And that's a very pervasive lesson they have been taught. It's some of that's kind of getting a little beyond my area of expertise because it's more of a sociological or psychological kind of question. I have colleagues that go into those things, and people that I work with at International Men's Day. It's interesting how many of them are educators or psychologists. From the education standpoint, there is lots of expression that it's not going to work, that there's not a path for me, there's no use to keep trying. So we hear that a lot in the education side. There's a lack of appreciation of the emotional challenges that our men and boys are facing. And some of this shows up within the psychological profession. I've got some colleagues that are, psychologists, and one even, runs a doctor of a PhD program in psychology. And they're very concerned that so few men are going into psychology anymore. It used to be a slightly male-dominated profession. It was probably at its best at that point. And now, less than 30% of students studying it are male. So we're losing that touch with that side entirely now. So that's a real concern that some have. One of the things, going back to the suicide stats, a lot of people point out, well, more women actually attempt suicide than men and boys, and they just aren't successful. Well, one way of looking at that from the psychological standpoint is, with the women, it's a cry for help. So they may not really be hoping to succeed. As I see it, with the men, they know no help is coming. They don't think anyone's there to help. That's why they do it. And people have now looked in and seeing that amongst the men that commit suicide, around half of them don't have any signs of mental illness. And that's a shock, because you would usually think, well, there's something wrong with their thinking process, with the way they see the world, and that's why they do it. But in reality, a large number of them, they seem to see the world quite clearly, and they don't have any hope. So that seems to be a symptom of this bigger problem of despair. And then just the general idea, they've bought the narrative that they're not necessary. A man without a purpose is a dangerous thing. In our society, that danger tends to fall on themselves, either through just deterioration or actually taking their own life.
By nature, men are the provider, are the protector, and are the leader. And I know these days we have been encountering different ideologies, right, in what the role of men and women are in society. But according to what you see in your research, in your studies, why is there a crisis of masculinity?
We have an idea that it is bad, that somehow it is a creation of oppression, that it's a societally generated idea, and then we can just suppress it and it will go away and everything will be fine. And that's really ignoring a lot of the basic nature of people, and I think that is a real problem. And I think where this has really become a crisis level is that we have changed how we expose boys and young men to healthy masculinity. And I was thinking about this a few years ago as we were kind of working through how we do International Men's Day events, and what we try to portray within that. When I was a kid, I was surrounded by great models of masculinity. And I was very blessed with my own father. He passed away recently, and I gave his eulogy, and I said I was the most fortunate man there ever was, because I had that great influence. And what I like about myself, I really largely inherited from him and from the influences that he and my mother made sure that I had. The coaches that I was involved with, the youth directors, the band directors, the debate coach, the people, that did things at school, the shop teachers, things like that. So I had this tremendous number of great male role models, almost father figures. And if I hadn't had so much father figure at home, they would have been my father figure. I would have had to try really hard to avoid that kind of influence because it was everywhere around me. Now our boys that are growing up don't have that. So many of them don't have their own father in the home. They don't have, uncles around them. They don't have grandfathers. Participation in team sports is at an all-time low. Fewer in the bands, fewer in scouting, fewer in church youth groups. So all those areas that I just got all this support and encouragement from, they may not have any of them. And in my own son's life, if I didn't make sure he had those opportunities, they weren't there. So those opportunities for support weren't coming to look for him. he had to go look for that. And that's largely what our boys now are growing up into, and our young men. If they want those influences, they have to seek them out.
What is healthy masculinity?
I think that's a very important thing to dig into. We used to have a much better understanding of it. Healthy masculinity was a man who was aggressive and proactive to do good things. They wanted to build things, and they wanted to build people, build families, build communities, and to protect them and advance them. They wanted their children to have better opportunities than they did. They were willing to sacrifice so that there would be a better day ahead. That's kind of the core to a lot of healthy masculinity. There's an idea of adventuring and exploring. What else can we learn? Where else can we go? What can we do? Can we do better than's done in the past and leave a better world than we found? So that's the real core of a lot of healthy masculinity. The aspect of a positive fatherhood is very important within that, because I think part of a healthy masculinity is want to leave a legacy in the world, and not just build houses, but also families and that sort of thing, and to influence other men and boys and as they grow and develop.
Coming from a home where I didn't have a great role model figure from a father, it affected me a lot, to the point that when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I was a single mother, and that's what I want to share here too. The divorce rates are to the roof. Mm-hmm. Single mother rates are to the roof. Women deciding on not getting married, numbers are to the roof. Women deciding that they don't want a partner are to the roof. Mm-hmm. And women deciding that they don't want to have kids are numbers to the roof. And I feel like this has been the consequence of the absence of those male role models that we need in our lives. Do you agree with that?
I think that affects it. I think it certainly is challenging. I think the statistics really bear that out, what you're saying there. There is a growing myth of the bad men that's out there, and we all see and know examples of that. And I think that's where we get a lot of this push towards saying masculinity is toxic. And one of the great examples I saw, I guess it's now almost 10 years ago, when you had the whole Me Too movement come out. One of the real poster child for that was a guy named Harvey Weinstein. And it was interesting. Everybody knew what he was doing for a decade. Nobody said anything about it. Somebody finally admitted it just to make a joke that he was basically groping, coercing, and evidently occasionally sexually assaulting young women that wanted to work for his company. And they said, well, this is an example of toxic masculinity. Well, he looked like an overweight old woman. He was begging and pleading with the whole world and trying to take advantage of people and leech off of them. And I thought, is this the least masculine male on the planet? And he becomes our representative of that. What that was a toxic lack of masculinity. Okay, you're rich and famous. Why can't you even find a lady that likes you on your own? Well, why do you do these things? There's nothing masculine about his behavior in any way. And that became the image that was there. We forget about all those that were doing the right things, that really exhibit it in a healthy way.
And I will tell everybody watching this episode, never see Hollywood, never see radio and television as your role model or as the highest expectation of anything. Why I'm not working in radio anymore? Mm-hmm. Because I say no. Mm-hmm. Because it was proposed to me, you have to behave this way, you have to do this. And I say, no, thank you, because my values were stronger than that. And I noticed a lot of the machismo behaviors are because we women don't change. And I'm going to give you some examples, doctor. when my mom comes to my house, and my mom was raised that way, so I cannot blame her, but I'm here to change the pattern. When my mom comes to my place, my oldest son is 16. If I send my son to wash dishes, my mom runs to wash the dishes. No, let my baby alone. He can play video games. When I say, help me cooking or help me cleaning, where are your clothes? And her behavior is teaching my son that because he's a boy, a man, he doesn't need to do anything at home. And I was raised that way. And I feel like we women need to change that too. We had to work together. Why this has to be a war, doctor?
Yeah, the war.
And maybe I say too much.
Well, no. Actually, you're bringing up some very important aspects of all this. And see, I look at the male side of a lot of things you were saying. There's always bad men. History tells us that, and there always will be. But the answer to bad men is great men. Okay, that's what straightens everything out. In the presence of the great men and showing the examples of what the great men are and do, that makes the bad men much weaker. They're not going to have that influence. And like that Harvey Weinstein example, how did anybody decide he needed to be influential? Okay, what kind of society made that validation of him? And I've got one of my colleagues who's one of the fellow International Men's Day people. He's African American, and we had this discussion, and he thought this was a really good analogy, that we didn't admit that African American men were really men till about 1950. In our society, we finally recognized that fact, and almost immediately Hollywood starts portraying them as bad men. And so basically, everything that I'm facing, African American men had a 50-year head start. So the things that my son now faces, his father was facing that kind of real propaganda about the myth of the bad man being everywhere. It was the myth of the bad black man. Before we had the myth of the bad native man, because we demonized, our Native American tribal members, the men, and then we tried to, stomp out all their healthy masculine behavior. And it becomes the point that you play cowboys and Indians. The Indians are the bad guys all the time, and that we have a long history of doing that. Now it really permeates everywhere. So I think that's one of our real challenges that we have. Now it's not all challenges though. One thing I wanted to bring out, and I bring out whenever I discuss this. I am an absolute believer in the men and boys of Generation Z. I am a 100% believer in them. And the reason I'm a believer in them is we have challenged them in just about every way you can think of. When most of them are in school, we close the schools, tell them they can't play sports, and heaven forbid, don't talk to any girls. And you can't go to concerts, you can't go to gatherings, and you'll be a good citizen if you sit home and stay on your couch and play on your computer. That's literally what we told them. And at the same time, all the liquor stores are open, all the drug stores are open. In a lot of places, the marijuana dispensaries are open. So those are critical functions, but teaching them and developing them wasn't. And then on top of that, all the messages that they are given about them, taking away those support systems that I grew up with and had the benefit of. We've done all that to them, and most of them are still here. They are still going, and quite a few of them are looking to be more than what they've been told they can be. And I see this all the time. And, I can truthfully, look at them and say this. The hand y'all have been dealt is not fair. Okay, it's not as good as it's been there in the past. We've given you all these different obstacles. and we have no right to expect anything good out of you from what has been done. Society has no right to do that. Yet, you need to be a great man, and that's what our world needs you to be. And it needs it very badly. We have not done things to make that be easy, but that's exactly what you need to do. And when I say this, it seems like it's an unfair expectation. I look as a part-time historian back through United States history. We had this situation before, and it's now the people we call the greatest generation. It's those that grew up in the Great Depression. They had the last pandemic called the Spanish flu, and COVID was not a good thing. It was a tragedy, but it was worse back then. Then we had the Great Depression, and then we had World War II. So half of them get hauled off to fight in a foreign land, and they changed the world. Those that survived all that decided we're going to do different. We're going to be better. We're going to work harder. We're going to accomplish more. We're going to make more out of ourselves. And that's literally what they did. So I see so much of that in Generation Z amongst our young men and boys. I see a resilience that's there. They may not know what to do yet, but they're going to do something. And I think they're going to take over the world in a decade or two. And what we do as the adult, older generations now is really going to influence how they do that. Will it be, really like the greatest generation? Do we give them the tools to do that? Or do they create something different that may not be as healthy, may not be as productive? That's certainly the possibility. Those of us now who are in positions of authority and leadership and, having children and families, we can do a lot about that. We can try to maintain and create those learning spaces where our boys and young men can be associated with healthy masculinity, that they can see what it is like. We can create pathways for them to be successful. It would be really nice if we made college less expensive. Okay, I've been saying that for a long time.
How can we do that? Like, for those listening, I know it may seem like a big challenge, but there is something that can be done. What can we do?
I ask my students a lot of times, what are they hearing about higher education? And last summer, we had 2 different presidential debates with 3 different candidates, and not one person discussed the cost of education. It never even got brought up. So it doesn't even get lip service anymore in our political world. And it is a bipartisan, offense. It concerns me that some of my colleagues think the limousine liberals will do more for them than the country club conservatives. And history proves that's not correct. We're getting ignored both directions. It would be nice to have someone in the White House that at some point in his life had wondered how he was going to pay for his tuition or his kids' tuition. We could also do things by pointing out less costly and more financially productive programming that is available. And I like to tell parents that if your child is really determined to do a certain field, they know what they want to do. They're getting scholarship funding. They're clearly well prepared for college as far as academically, and they are well prepared from an emotional standpoint to leave home. Then they definitely need to go to university straight away, and you need to encourage them to be in a field that's going to have a good financial return to it. And there are definitely those that work out. It's usually the ones that prepare you to go into a field that the job market values. So that's a really good thing. But then I say every time the answer to one of those questions is no, you need to consider the community college route. And you can get a great freshman and sophomore year education on a community college campus at a noticeably lower expense. And most of them have university programs that you can transfer smoothly into. and then they have some real advantages to them. If they are still exploring to see what they want to do academically, a community college can be a better place to explore. Okay, it's 30 cents on the dollar for the tuition. So having an exploration class costs you a lot less. The class sizes are smaller. You'll probably have 15 to 25 students instead of 100. So it's easier to explore that way. You can get more attention from the faculty and more interaction that way. So that's a real plus. And if somebody has, a deficiency academically, say that they score a 19 on ACT section for writing or for verbal knowledge or mathematics, the community colleges have mechanisms that are better for developmental education to catch them up. So there's some real advantages for that. And if they are not really emotionally ready to go off from home, then you can often find a good one that's nearby.
Yeah. So after our conversation, I see a lot of things going on here. The first one is that the drop-off numbers are associated to different factors. Number one, cost. Second one, absence of role models, male role models in their lives. Third, as a consequence, the crisis on mental health that we are suffering. And also the crisis of healthy masculinity that we are suffering. But there are things that we can do in all of those areas.
Yes.
And I want to mention the last one just because now is my space and I take advantage of it. No one tells me, shut up, or no one's telling me, do this. If not, you are fired. I will say there is a big absence of faith and values these days. And that's affecting not just men, women, society in general. If you have a group of those boys that are suffering right now, what would you tell them, doctor?
First off, I would tell them that there is definitely hope. And there is hope for life in general, but also for spiritual growth and fulfillment. Because one of the things that's really cool about our Generation Z, young men and boys, is they are going and exploring church and faith at higher rates than any recent generations have at a young age. Because we've been on a long trajectory that every generation continually gets less faith and spiritually centered. Church attendance is lower, faith professions is lower, Bible reading is lower over and over again until now, because there is a large cluster of the Gen Z, and this is more of the men. More of the men and the boys are seeking this out. And so this is a trend that has been going on for a few years now. That shocks a lot of the demographic people, because they think, well, since our whole life it's been a linear process going this direction, now it's going up. And historically, that's not unusual. Basically, people have some of the benefits of faith without following it, so they don't follow. And then eventually those benefits wane in society because there's not enough, and then people go the other direction. So I would encourage them to do that, and to have a knowledge that they're not going to be alone. The numbers are turning in their favor, and we're not without young women doing the same thing. It's just a little more pronounced amongst the men, and it's a little more shocking because we've historically expected women to have more faith and more spiritual grounding than the men, and now it's kind of crossed the other direction. So I expect we will see more from the women as well, but I'm not near as knowledgeable of that. Maybe a hope, but we're definitely seeing it amongst the men.
Yeah. Well, it has been a pleasure having you. This conversation is very important. And I will just want to end inviting everybody. I don't care if you're a man, if you're a woman. We all need to work together on this, because
Yes,
at the end of the day, it's affecting us.
Yes. Well, I would like to give one little commercial on this. And this is for my International Men's
Yes.
Day group. We've got a Facebook page, International Men's Day of Mississippi. We've got some, pictures and films of some of our previous activities. And I'm very glad to give anybody information about what we have learned, how you can have events of your own, and how you can use these to support other efforts in your community that are developing men and boys. That's really become where we've had the most success. It's nice to gather a bunch of people together to celebrate men's issues, but by supporting other groups that are doing that kind of work, I think that's where the real impact is being felt. So I'd be glad to help. The name again is Mark Fincher at Mississippi State University, and the Facebook page is International Men's Day of Mississippi.
Awesome. And I will be putting all the links in the description of the episode, so you guys can just click on it and go straight to your Facebook page. Where can people find more of your research, or how can they contact you? Are you in LinkedIn or?
I am on LinkedIn. I'm maybe the only Mark Fincher on there. If you do a Google search on academic writing, there's me and a person who is a rescue ranger out in the West Coast who helps save people that are backpacking. So I'm not as exciting as him, but I've written other things as well. So it's mostly on finance, access, and the history of higher education. But I have a little interest in hunger and homelessness. So that might pop up as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you.
It has been a
Enjoyed it.
pleasure talking to you.